Believe it or not, I am a Marvel Comics guy. But lately, Marvel Comics has not been the best, right? So today I'm here to discuss the very best and the worst that Marvel Comics has to offer. Guys, I'm Mike Spiderslayer. Welcome back to Comic Book Corner 2.0. If you love daily comic book content and you love me helping you make decisions on what comic books to buy, and you've been watching for a while and you haven't hit that subscribe button, why don't you go ahead and do so now. And listen, Marvel Comics has not been the best as of late, and it really shows based off of what's going on with, I would say, the independent comic books and the DC comic books, the resurgence of DC within the year where they've gone all in and they have come up with some excellent stories, where I'm at the point right now where I'm like, man, I'm liking DC a lot more right now than Marvel. And I decided to come up with this list because I was like, well, what Marvel books am I really getting excited about these days? Like, if someone asked me right off the street and say, hey, Mike, can you recommend Marvel comic books for me? I might have to think about that for a second. And there was a time and a place where you didn't have to think about that. Marvel Comics was king, and every single comic book that they had out was absolute fire. You could talk about the main titles like in Iron Man, the Avengers, the Spider-Man, the Uncanny X-Men, and it was absolutely awesome, right? And now you have to think about it. So we're gonna go over, obviously, my favorite comics that I'm reading right now when it comes to Marvel, and then we're gonna go through a brief list when it comes to comic books that maybe just came out and are showing some promise. And then I'll definitely give you the disappointments that Marvel Comics has to offer as well. So let's talk about, I would say, no particular real order here, my 10 favorite comics from Marvel right now. So let's talk about, let's go with the sleeper pick. One is Storm. Storm, I most recently jumped on board, and I regret jumping off of this book after one or two issues originally when it came out, but I picked it up because of the One World Under Doom event that's going on, and I said, okay, I'm going to follow everything that's going on in that book. And when you look at the exquisite artwork that that book has to offer, and just kind of the interesting storytelling that's going on with the character right now, I've been really enjoying it. Again, I've only read a couple of issues and she's got maybe some OP powers at the moment, but it's a fun read and something that I would recommend if you're looking for a decent X solo title, okay? There's a lot of them out there right now. There's way too many of them, but this one is one that maybe you should not overlook. Another book that I have been enjoying, and it's West Coast Avengers. We get a ragtag team of heroes that Tony Stark has put together. Not an original story, obviously. We've seen this before, but he wants to get the West Coast Avengers together again, and he's teaming up with Rhodey here. And the team that he puts together is not the best, and their intention is to reform villains, right? Try to maybe turn the corner with these guys, put them on the team, and things are rough around the edges, right? And one of those members is Ultron. So how do you turn around an android, a robot that's always wanted to take over the world? Well, you have to read it to find out. Or I should say Firestar is in this book as well. And she is actually suffering from PTSD from the whole X-Men Krakoan age, and that's been great also, like seeing that character go through certain situations and kind of trying to escape from it or try to get better from it is an interesting story. So I feel like this book, yes, is early to determine if it's going to be a great book, but it definitely is showing some character growth. So for me, that's promise. Another book that also just came out, but it's going on to its third issue. This is Ultimate Wolverine. This book has been interesting as well. It's kind of sad, though, that we're relying on alternate versions of characters to get our fix in storytelling, but nevertheless, it is a good story about this version of Wolverine who's the Winter Soldier, right? And it's all created by the Ultimate Universe, and Illyana and Colossus is behind it. And like I said, he's this ultimate weapon. He hasn't even spoken in the comic yet, but with good artwork and very violent storytelling, it leaves you curious to see what's going to happen in the future. Another book that I've been enjoying, and this goes like side by side, is Miles Morales and Deadpool, especially right now. The two books are actually crossing over with each other. As there's this story with Deadpool that had this bounty on Spider-Man, right? And they're starting to fight with each other and whatnot. And Miles Morales overall has been a great book, even without the Deadpool story in it. He's shown some character growth. He's got some new weapons, new tech, great artwork. Probably the best run of Miles Morales Spider-Man I have read in quite some time. I would say since Miles has been in his new universe, this is my favorite run. Next book is another Spider book, believe it or not. It's Spider-Boy. This is a fun book also because I've said this many times in my reviews and whatnot. This is a book where it has all ages involved. You could be as old as me, 50 years old, reading this comic book and finding it fun. There's definitely growth within the character, within the supporting cast. There's different characters being introduced, and that's what you want from a comic book, and that's just not what we're getting in the main Amazing Spider-Man title right now. The character's at a complete stall, but with Spider-Boy, it's fun going through his actions and adventures and his team-ups, and I think Dan Slott's been doing a bang-up job. It's got good artwork, and again, it's all ages, so I definitely would recommend this book. Any of these books, if you don't like or you like, that's totally fine. That's what makes this hobby so great. This is just my personal list that I'm finding enjoyment out of Marvel Comics. They have like 50-something titles each month, and this is only 10 books. Venom is the next book that I would say has shown improvement. I think Al Ewing in his first run of this focused on the whole King in Black aspect and tried to go very cosmic, very in-depth storytelling like he can, especially like if you've read his other stuff, like say for instance Immortal Hulk. Now I really enjoyed the take of Immortal Hulk, and it went into different places unknown that you've never seen in the character, but somehow I still managed to follow it and I enjoyed it. So he tried doing the same thing with Venom, and I just thought it lost me. He made freaking Eddie Brock into a time traveler and all this other stuff, and there's different versions of himself, and it got very confusing. And if you never read the series and you tried to jump on board, yeah, good luck. You're gonna have to read that trade if you want to read it. So now the way he's doing it is he's taking the character, and Eddie Brock is no longer the symbiote. There's a mystery character, right? And some people may not like that. Some people will be like, well, the only Venom is always going to be Eddie. And I totally get that. But I do like the mystery element here, as we don't know right now who that symbiote is. And Dylan in here, which is Eddie's son, is the one that's trying to solve the mystery on trying to figure out what's going on. Stupid Paul is in this comic book, which people hate the character Paul, me included. But I'm thinking that, I'm putting it out there saying, hey, this guy could be Paul. This could be the new symbiote, and maybe this can create a whole stir of controversy, right? Bunch of red herrings on who could be the new Venom, but I don't know, man. It's great to actually have a surprise when it comes to a comic book and not knowing who that identity is. And that's what's missing from comics today before their releases, is the surprise element. Everything is always spoiled for you before even the comic book comes out. All right. The next book we're going to talk about is Moon Knight Fist of Khonshu. Say what you want when it comes to Jed MacKay. Jed MacKay may not be always the best writer. I've realized that now that he's writing a lot more books, but I feel like he's better on more of a solo book than he is on these team books. I think his X-Men is okay. I think his Avengers is not that great at all. I think he can write a great Black Cat. I think he can write a great Moon Knight. I do think he has good character moments, but if you notice his storytelling, even within the team books, he always focuses on just characters in a single 3 pages, and then he goes to another character and he goes to another character. It shows me that he's not the best team writer. So he should just stick to individual storytelling. I think that's where he shines the best. And Moon Knight is fun because we're focusing on Moon Knight right now, who's just fighting this god-like character that you never knew of. And he does have a decent supporting cast, but they don't always take the light. And he's been writing this book for a very long time. So I think he just has a great handle on this comic book. And the artwork in here is beautiful. So Moon Knight Fist of Khonshu is a great addition to his already fantastic run of Moon Knight. All right, next book, and say what you want about this book, and I know people have a lot of different opinions, and this is The Ultimates. But for me, when I go into reading comic books, I think critical of them, but I don't go overcritical, right? So if someone has an agenda, yes, you can clearly see it, but I don't go into too much depth when it comes to that stuff. I just try to enjoy the story for what it is, because if you and I know this is a fine line, but if you over criticize comic books, if you go into it looking and trying to find things wrong with it, I think you're going to wind up eventually hating the hobby. You got to go into it kind of like, okay, here's a story. I'm going to read it. If I like it, I like it. If I don't, I don't. Yes, we're going to find things that we don't like about it, but you know, everybody is different, like I said. But when it comes to the Ultimates, I like this story of this world of these different versions of heroes where the Maker has tried to get rid of the heroes and they slowly come back, and Iron Lad's banished him and he can come back in 12 months, and we get slowly introduced to this world's heroes. They're going through trials and tribulations, and I like it. I think it's a good book, and I know there's people out there that don't like it, but hey, if you don't, that's fine, and if you do, that's fine too. All right, and then I would say that my favorite book here, and I would say that this is the upper echelon of all Marvel Comics right now, and it goes to Ultimate Spider-Man. I would say that this is the book, in my eyes, that is top tier, right? That kind of equals those great indie comic books like a Rook Exodus or Transformers or Geiger or Space Ghost, right? Like those books, okay? It's just always entertaining to read. Every time it comes out, it's on top of my pile. We get this different version of Peter Parker, who is what we want in the regular title. We want him married to Mary Jane with the kids. We see actual, like, it's like character growth. It's like, this is what Peter would be when he grew up, right? And he discovers his powers much later in life. We're getting introduced to this version of the Sinister Six. And so it's just a lot of fun. And the most recent issue, you're just like, oh my God, your jaw dropped. Now, you don't always get a lot of Spider-Man in this comic book, right? But nevertheless, it's still very entertaining. And if a book can entertain you without showcasing Spider-Man in every single issue, then I do think you have a great title here. So I really like this book. All right, so those are I would say my 10 favorite Marvel comics. And I went through this list, all these books that come out within a month, over and over and over again, and this is what I found, okay? Now, there are some mid-tier books that I did not list in here that I didn't feel made the cut. I enjoy them, but they're not my favorite, okay? Now, here are books that just came out that are too early to call, but may show some promise based off of like their first issue, I should say. The first one is Red Hulk. This is a supposedly new ongoing series with Thunderbolt Ross being the Red Hulk once again, trying to escape a jail cell from Doctor Doom. Has decent artwork. I like the first issue. We'll see how the story progresses, and the big thing is how does it continue once this event is over, okay? The next book that I liked is Carnage. That first issue was pretty good, as well as we get to see Eddie Brock, like I said, no longer the Venom symbiote, but he's now part of the Carnage symbiote. This has a very dark vibe to it. And he's made a deal with the Carnage symbiote where the Carnage symbiote can still kill, but it can be only serial killers only, so it can get its lust for killing, right? So interesting deal that these two have come up with, and now in the next issue, they're going to be trying to find that villain out there that they can possibly go after. So definitely showed some promise. Another book that shows some promise is Jedi Knights. I read that first issue, and I haven't been really fond of Star Wars comic books as of late, but this was during the prequel era, and we get introduced to all the Jedi Knights from the Jedi Council. They went out onto their mission firsthand, and you got to see them in action, and it definitely teases you of what's things to come for Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn and all those other different characters there. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. So that definitely shows some promise. Now with these titles, does it show a turnaround for Marvel Comics? Maybe. The next book that I seem to have enjoyed since the One World Under Doom is Fantastic Four. Now I read the first issues since North started writing the book, and I do feel like his dialogue can be overly, I don't know, it could be heavy at times and maybe long-winded, right? And the thing that turns me off about Fantastic Four comics at times is freaking Reed Richards. The dude is such a nerd to where it just turns me off, right? I don't know what Sue sees in him. But anyway, when I read that book, I'm like, oh my God. But based off of the last couple issues, I do like the grounded elements. I do like the other characters in there. The artwork is good. So we're going to see how Fantastic Four continues, because I most recently jumped on again. So like I said, we'll see what happens with Marvel. There is these 10 books. There's these too early to call books, but there's still a lot more disappointments, and they need to change things around. So let's talk about the disappointing comic books. And these are a lot of them, unfortunately, your flagship comic books. So your first one is going to be Amazing Spider-Man. Like, how long has that been a disappointment? This book is probably number one on everyone's pull list besides Batman out there. And it's been such a drag. It's been such a stall. The story that's going on right now doesn't accomplish anything. We're just trying to get to the new run on it, right? And it's just like, it's not even in my top 10 most anticipated anymore until we get to that new issue 1 once again. Will things change? Who knows? It needs to change. It's so sad to see such a hero, so popular, have a shitty comic book. It's so bad. Another book that's a disappointment, and you can say what you want, whether you like this version of Uncanny X-Men right now, is Uncanny X-Men. This book will probably never, ever, ever again live up to Claremont's run on Uncanny. We're just never going to see that storytelling again. And for old comic book readers like me, you always are going to have that expectation. And I always tell new readers, if you want to read good, excellent X-Men story, read the volume ones. That is the way those characters were created. That's the way those characters really are. And right now we just get kind of like former shells of those particular characters. Now, I'm not saying that this comic is bad. It's just, it will just never live up to that Claremont days. And I just feel like we're in a way lost of what to do with all the X-Men characters, right? We come up with these cheap crossovers, we come up with like different worlds, and it's never that great. And I think Hickman's vision was a good vision, but they never let it see it through, right? So, I don't know. Same thing with the X-Men. We go back to the X-Men. It's another main title, right? Back in the day, you had Uncanny X-Men, you had X-Men. They're side by side. They would cross over stories. It's the same thing. It just doesn't hit the same way that it does. I feel like it lacks character development. I think it lacks storytelling. I think it lacks villains, right? It's like, when was the last time you saw them really fight against villains? Like, Magneto is part of the X-Men. Like, it doesn't work. Emma Frost, like, you get all these watered down versions of these characters, and it's very, very frustrating. And I talked about it earlier when it comes to Jed MacKay, is the Avengers. Look at the Avengers, guys. It's not the same book as it once was. Read the Avengers of old if you can. And I know storytelling is much different today than it is to yesterday, but it's just, the stories are just not good. The book doesn't go anywhere right now. We had a main story introduced way back then. It's called the Ashen Combine is the villains, right? And in this world, we've barely touched on it. I think 23 issues, we're going to finally touch on these characters once again, and we have smaller stories involved. They're just not very good, and it's a very repetitive motion when it comes to the Avengers. Another book that was actually decent in my eyes is Incredible Hulk, but it's so long-winded. It's such a story that's overdrawn and overtold and so spread out and decompressed that why can't we just end the story and move on to a new story arc? What happened to those days where you had 4 issues, new story, 4 issues, new story, 4 issues, new story? Why do we gotta write an entire run with just one damn story? If you don't like that story, or if it's dragged out too long, you're gonna drop the book. And that's what's going on with Incredible Hulk right now, and I got bored with it. And the inconsistencies in the artwork. Nick Klein is an awesome visual storytelling. Then you get the other guy that's on here, it doesn't even compare. It's so jarring. Oh my God, here's another story, or another book. This is Iron Man. So Iron Man is very bad right now. So the last book, right, I think was Dylan who wrote it, or Duggan? I'm not sure. One of the two. It's the same writer that writes the West Coast Avengers. He wrote the last run of Iron Man, and it was decent, right? It wasn't the best, but it was decent. And we go to this, and it's absolute boredom, nonsense. The artwork is just atrocious. The lettering just seems like it's so simplistic. Like, it seems like there's no effort in it. And I hate saying that because people do spend their time creating these comic books, but it's just not good. Iron Man has this long beard and all this other stuff. And I jumped back on board for the One World Under Doom to see, okay, it says it's a new jumping on point. Let's see what happens. I'm looking at the book when I was doing my comic book haul. This thing is just like, it turns me off. It doesn't even want me to read it because it looks so poor. So Iron Man has fallen down so far, even from the Matt Fraction run. Like, I have this omnibus in here, and I remember reading that run, and that run was fantastic. I really enjoyed that run. All right, so the next one is Immortal Thor, or Thor just in general. It's just, the last run we had was from Donny Cates, and unfortunately he got into his accident, or he wasn't mentally stable, whatever's going on with him at the time, and we had a good run going there. And I actually really liked it. And then we got a different writer on it. It fell flat. Then we wound up getting Al Ewing on it. I hated it from the start. Could be a personal preference for me. If you like it, let me know in the comments below. But it's just not the same book. And I get it, different writers write different versions of the characters. That's how we get these comic books these days, right? You don't get Chris Claremont anymore writing 20 years of X-Men. You don't get Michelini writing 10 years of Spider-Man, right? The last time we got to see that was Dan Slott writing Spider-Man. So in that aspect, comics have changed a lot, right? But Immortal Thor is definitely a letdown. Daredevil. Okay, so if you look at Chip Zdarsky's run on Daredevil, actually was a decent book. So you get to this run, and some might like it, like I say. But Solomon Ahmed's writing, for me, a lot of times falls flat, and I don't really enjoy it. So again, these are the very best characters that Marvel has to offer, and they're not in my top 10 comic books. What does that say, right? Next one is Captain America. Same thing. Let me know in the comments below. Tell me the last run of Captain America that you thought was absolutely outstanding. I couldn't even tell you, right? It may have caught some buzzworthy stuff like, Captain America was Hydra, right? But doesn't mean it was any good. That's the thing, right? So now we're going to get a new series done by Chip Zdarsky, so we'll see what happens there. But right now, Captain America, I don't know anybody who's buying it. I don't know anybody who talks about it. So those are some of the books that that are just not making the mark or not making the grade, right? So a couple of problems that we have with Marvel also, besides these books that I announced, and I can't believe this video has gone on so long, and I apologize if it is too long for you. This is too many solo books with the mutants, and I did touch on this earlier, right? There's too many. Why do we need 50-something books from Marvel, and why does the mutants or the X-Men need so many solo titles? People will be like, there's so many solo titles, I'm just not going to read any of them. And then you might miss out on the one or two that are good. Like I told you, like Storm. Storm is a good one right now, right? So, I don't know. Then we got to stop just the gimmicks altogether. Just way too many gimmicks. Like the Red Band Edition gimmick this past year. Everyone was super excited about it, right? It's like, oh, we're going to get more bloodier content than ever. There's going to be curse words. Like, nobody knew, right? And then you open up that Red Band bag and you cut it open. There's 1 or 2 pages in there with a little bit more blood, but nothing out of the ordinary that you wouldn't see in a book that's gory from Marvel, in Marvel standards, right? I've read plenty of Deadpool Wolverine books that were bloodier than the Red Band edition. So when you talk about gimmicks and Red Band comics, dude, don't waste your money with that. That was the biggest mistake that I think all of us could have made, right? Including myself. And you're thinking, well, maybe the next one might be better, maybe the next one might. No, it never did. Never really panned out to the point where it was like, this is some black label stuff, right? So yeah, too many events. We've said that forever. Let's scale down the events. Like, I don't mind like a singular main event that connects the entire universe, maybe for a year. Not for a year, but for during the summertime or something like that. But then you got all the events within the actual universe. So you got like the X-Manhunt going on right now throughout the titles while the Doom event is going on, right? Shouldn't the X-Men be dealing with the Doom situation? I think we had an X-Manhunt going on in X-Factor this week. Last week we had X-Factor going on with One World Under Doom at the same time. It's crazy, dude. So you just got too many events. You got the Spider-Verse stuff going on. Yeah. And like I said earlier, just too many books. So let's get rid of that stuff. Let's trim down the fat. We're never going to lower prices, but maybe at least stabilize the prices. Make less books so you have better quality writers on these comic books. And maybe you'll get a stronger Marvel company or Marvel just in general. And I don't know. Will things change? We'll see. DC did it. They're better. Will Marvel get better? Let me know in the comments below. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I never thought it was going to take 29 minutes to talk about Marvel, but if you liked it, give it a thumbs up. Leave your comments down below. There's always more content right here for you to click on. And remember, guys, always support the local comic shops. Keep reading, keep collecting, and always read your comics so we can have great comic conversation. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care. Bye.